Thank you, Edie.
Yeah.
This is great. Okay, great. The stream's working, so that's good.
Are you gonna come in on Wednesday? Plug the
thank
whole
you.
thing in?
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, wait. We can, because I just plugged the roller in.
Sorry.
Then
We're almost ready. Yeah, yeah.
just plug. Oh, I might have disconnected the owl. Did I do that? Yes, I
Oh,
did.
yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, testing, that's good. Good.
Back. Okay. Do we want the speakers to be the owl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine. Yeah, that's good.
Right.
So for everybody out on Zoom, we're just gonna give you a little warning that during the reading, you may stop seeing the reader. And it's just because we have this wacky camera. It seems to be working good right now, so that's the good news.
You're more close to the garage door with because sometimes there's like motorcycles and it might throw off the sound.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. Okay, thanks, Edie. Yeah, and then here, I'll give you this here. So this is our night out. This is the low res creative writing night out about the town. And we like to hang out with community partners. And the IPRC is one of the most amazing community partners. So I will hand it over to Harper, who's going to tell you some things about the IPRC.
I'm actually gonna take that. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Harper Quinn. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm one of the co-leaders here. And I am delighted to be hosting you all, or the IPRC is delighted to be hosting this program. It's so nice to have partner programs and to bask in a little bit of the PNCA Creative Writing Program shine. A couple of housekeeping things before we get into what the IPRC is. There's a skate park upstairs, so that might be some other additional noise that we contend with. Just want to put that out there. If you're looking for restrooms, they're through the back blue door to the right. And I have heard that it's a couple of folks' first time at the IPRC, so I want to give you the full IPRC intro and tell you more about how to get looped in if you're curious about it, or maybe you're visiting from out of town, and when you're in town, you're also curious about getting looped in. Our speakers sounding funky.
The camera's looking at the speaker because it thinks that's.
Yeah, it's good.
We can, we'll just keep rolling. Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep rolling. I actually didn't mind that. Yeah.
So with the IPRC, we're a nonprofit community organization. The premise of the IPRC is that the world of print and publishing is a much cooler, more dynamic place when artists and writers have the means to produce their own work. And we do that by providing individual access to tools and resources for printmakers, artists, writers. And we have lots of workshops in book arts, creative writing, screen printing, reso printing. And we also have a Zoom library. So there's a lot at the ITRC. A couple of things that I don't want to forget to mention is to get on our mailing list. We send mostly monthly newsletters. That's a good way to keep in touch. You can follow us on Instagram, and you can also ask me anything. So if you're curious about the IPRC and want to hear more, talk to me about becoming a member, taking a workshop, and maybe if you're curious about printing a zine or a broadside or some other kind of print ephemera, please get at me. Without further ado, am I handing it off to
Edie.
Edie?
Edie, yay. Thank you, Harper. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to introduce our readers, and first up we have Stephanie Adams-Santos. Stephanie is a Guatemalan-American artist and writer whose work spans poetry, prose, screenwriting, and illustration. Often grappling with themes of strangeness and belonging, their work reflects a fascination with the weird, numinous, and primal forces that shape inner life. They are the author of several poetry collections and chapbooks, including Dream of Xibalba and Swarm Queen's Crown. Stephanie served as staff writer and story editor on the television anthology horror series, Two Sentence Horror Stories. In addition to their literary work, Stephanie is creating an original tarot deck that blends poetry, animism, and ancestral magic. Please welcome Stephanie.
Can you hear me through this?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So beautiful to be among you all and to be able to share poems. What is that?
Yeah, I think
It's not turned off.
It's very quiet.
This, yeah,
yeah.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say, yeah. Okay, thanks, Harp. This is a very special place to me. I taught years ago with Harper in this space, the poetry certificate program, and we had really special times together. And this is just one of the most special places in Portland where people can create on their own in independence. And I encourage you all to look at the zine library. There's so much here. I was just looking at some precious tiny miniature books in the other room. So I'm just gonna read a little bit from Dream of Xibalba. It's one poem, one book length poem. So there are no titles, and I will just read a selection from it, and feel free, especially if you've had a long day, to just close your eyes and let it follow. And I'll start with the most important part of the whole book, which is the epigraph. And it's a little poem that was collected from words my grandma said at the kitchen table one morning. The owl says, "Tukuru, cuckoo, tukuru, cuckoo." There are days I wake with such a sadness. Who can say why? Who can say what for? Tukuru, cuckoo, tukuru, cuckoo. So the owls say. Flowers at your feet like pools of night. You reach into the folds as into the shadows of your reflection. The mountain stirs. La sierra de los Cuchumatanes susurra. Ahí donde andan los cazadores de los loros. Here again is a mythos of blood, thoughts filling and emptying as water from a vase. Green water, black water, flickering blank. Water without reflection, water that smells of death, warm as the tears that draw trails of light from your spectral breast, remembering, forgetting, you flare into being. Tendrils propagate from your bones, searching for something to cling to. If only you could pray the right way, you might reach the secret sleep of the Creator where the roses engulf you. If you had the right words, you could taste the whole earth on this vacant tongue. You want to know where you come from. Aquí la noche da vueltas lentas, un sopilote negro e inmenso. The night circles you with its many eyes of fire. Below you, the ground is a vast accumulation. You scry into an emptiness where everything blinks back. 1,000 bodies of memory, a buzzing through darkness, a great swarm that descends, eating the violets, the lilies, the aguacates, all reflections consumed. The eclipse cuts even your shadow. You are the lost daughter of Xibalba. Can't you see the Sith swinging from your footsteps? 1,000 deaths in every direction. The forest burns, inner lives and past, wrinkling in the ferns. You can't hurry your eyes from the sigil of light that binds them. From your brain, the colors seep down, come like magma into the cool cavity of your chest and shatter and darken to obsidian. Severed at the stalk of utterance, you kiss the air, you kiss the creases of your hands, but it's agony whose tongue enters you. In the middle of your body, a dream is coming. In the petrified loom, a figure burns in the weft, alone in her house, your great-grandmother engulfed in skirts of fire. The past walks circles inside you, a corpse with backward feet, a loop of herself, weaving herself, remembering herself inside another body. You can speak a little bit of Spanish, but a lost language sits on your tongue, a toad, the weight of stone, black and green from the river, fulgent the perfume of its flesh. If you speak now, you'll lisp, you'll hiss. Midday smoke closes the sky where the sun becomes the moon, a primitive guy, a primitive eye, a legible gaze that blurs and possesses, passing over broken sigils strewn on the ground. The arms of trees are the voided wands torn open for the dreaming of fire and fed by a bestial wind, a wind that sucks the wines from a wrinkle in the air, a wind that drinks the blood from the spirit's eye. Feral children howl in cages, calling back to the coyotes that descend from the hills, back and forth, their hunger and delirium, back and forth, the fire and the wind, the furnace and the ash, the long road home, the season of fire. One day in the garden, a door in your chest swings open and a shadow flies out. Your mother's memory of chasing vultures by the Selewa, her feet bare, the color of dust. Wings glide over the roses and over your hands. Sombras tiernas de los opilotes. The shadows between the roses fall over the earth. It seems all the mouths are open, and between these aisles of breath, a stranger wanders. The sky is getting black beyond you where it will rain, where you will again be baptized with your own name, and you will wash the blood and the day from your face. Your swollen head suckles at the stars filled with the glinting blue fire of the dead. In the kitchen, masa lifts on the fire, little faces of the moon shaped by someone else's hands. A burning angel feeds at the shadows there, a smell of white lilies from the corner of the room. One day you'll return to the place of the parrots, unhunt them, give them back the depths of their eyes. A toad sings from your tongue, vanishing into water, green and brown and black, swimming into shadows. From the sole of each foot, two stela grow upright, bearing the names you've forgotten, the names you never knew. Only an insect persists in the yard, unseen for the dark, its black churr waves invisibly between us, a veil of anguish enfolding our kiss. Thank you all.
Next, we have Poupeh Missaghi. Poupeh is a writer, editor, translator between English and Persian, and educator. Her second book, Sound Museum, is forthcoming in October 2024, and her debut novel, Transrelating House One, was published in 2020. Her translations include I'll Be Strong for You by Nassam Harashi and In the Streets of Tehran by Nila, as well as forthcoming Boys of Love by Ghazi Rabahavi. She is currently an assistant professor of English and literary arts at the University of Denver and a faculty mentor at the low residency MFA in creative writing at the Pacific Northwest College of Art. Please welcome Poupeh.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's such a beautiful reading.
Thank you.
I love that poem. Let's see. I'm gonna time myself. Hopefully I don't go over. So I'm gonna read sections from an essay. This chapter is called Palm Chor, which translates into primrose flower. And this is from a collection of essays. It's a work in progress called, for now, Flowers in Bloom, an Unbordered Encyclopedia. She, my mother, is named after the flower primrose, or more correctly, after its Persian name, Palm Chor. A name not that common in my mother tongue, Persian, the same way her life story is not common. Or that is how I like to think about it. I say mother tongue to only immediately have a vision of mom's Persian handwriting, simple and basic, similar to a child's handwriting in elementary school. And remember that she only studied Persian up to 3rd grade before being sent to a boarding school in Switzerland for 4 years. To return to Tehran, but to continue to study at a French school. As a child, I found it fascinating that my mother had another language besides Persian, a language she sometimes used to speak to her father, my grandfather, with whom we lived, making French their language, private to the two of them, a language neither of them ever spoke to or taught us the kids, so we did not pick it up. Though I did eventually begin to learn it in my early 20s when I started my undergrad studies in translation. This privacy of language was one aspect of the special bond my mother had with her father, a bond whose origins demands a story of its own, told at length at its own time. But to not leave you, my dear audience members, hanging here is the short version of it, at least how it has been told in the family, the myth that it has become. The story goes that when my mother was born, my grandmother, her mother, made a demand of my grandfather, the details of which are not revealed or clear, while she was still in the hospital, threatening him that if he did not fulfill her wishes, she would abandon him and the baby. He did not, and so the baby, my mother, was sent back home with the driver, and my mother's mother left. As you see, this anecdote does not make much sense and has many gaps in it, but no one in the family speaks about it in more detail, and I have not gotten any clarification the few times I asked about it. And so these few lines of narrative remain to be the story of my mother's beginnings and that of her close relationship to her father, my grandfather, a man of many mysteries of whom I'm still in awe to this day. But let's go back to the girl who arrived in the world and in the house and was named Poncho, which for you equals to Primrose, though one of the first lessons one is taught as a translator in training is not to translate proper names, which is a rule that holds up only until it does not, depending on the context of the name and the role it plays in the source text, the original one, as well as the function and purpose of the target text, the text in translation. The not to be translated name, Poncho, which I understand might not be easy for you to pronounce, but I hope you give yourself the trouble to practice pronouncing properly rather than to dismiss or butcher, as unfortunately is the case with many non-American names, was used less often in our familiar settings and instead was replaced with the shortened form Pami. In my teenage years, I was adamant to call my mother by this shortened name instead of calling her mom or by her full name, perhaps as part of my teenager self's hopes to move away from the hierarchical daughter-mother relationship toward being on a par with her, performing independence while remaining close and intimate. I have yet to hear of another Iranian girl or woman named Pamchal, but the word itself and the flower it represents did, of course, exist beyond the walls of our house long before my mother's birth. The first instance of it that I personally remember as part of the larger experience of the Iranian life goes back to my own childhood years and a TV series called Gol Pamchal, or The Primrose Flower. I type these two titles as equivalents, but I'm baffled at how they feel different in my body. The English is informal, factual, while the Persian is accompanied by music, the one playing at the beginning of the series episodes, a song that before the airing of the series, I took to primarily belong to my mom and our family, believing that a friend of my grandfather had written the lyrics and composed the music just for her. But in truth, while my grandfather and other family members did sing this song to my mom, the song had an older history and the lyrics were written by Sayyid Jafar Mehrdad, and the song was performed for the first time in 1951, before my mother was born. There is, however, a connection here between the private and the public of the song, which I learned when I asked Mom about it while writing this essay. And it is that the song was played every Friday, our day of the weekend in Iran, from the National Public Radio in the late 1950s, because my grandfather had made a request from a friend who worked in the broadcasting company. Over the years, the song continued its life in various versions in the public sphere until decades later, it turned once again into a popular song present in many households around the country through this series, Gol Pamchal. In the first draft of this essay, I wrote that the series ran on TV in the 1980s during the years of the Iran-Iraq War, which started when I was 3 and lasted for 8 years, though it reached the capital city of Tehran, where we lived only in its later years. I wrote that the series ran on one of the few existing state-run broadcasting channels during those childhood years of war and electricity shutdowns, and rationalized coupons for basic resources such as gasoline and milk. I wrote these words because that is how I remember the events, the war and my family watching the series together to be simultaneous. But then I went on the fact-checking route and found out that the series actually went on air in 1991. That is 3 years after the war came to an end. And this is interesting to me, my dear audience members, not because obviously it reveals the unreliability of memory, but because it makes me see how the series, with its fictional story of the war and the hardships of its survivors, seeped out of the frame of the magical box of the TV to allow a continuation in our imagination of the war and all that it entailed, years after the war had actually ended on the ground, enmeshing the post-war time with the time of the war, extending that connection all the way to this day, many decades later in my body and psyche. The series was about a young girl, played by a novice actress, who at the time of the broadcasting was 12 years old, only 2 years younger than me, who, like the character she played, was a war refugee from the southern provinces, whose family had lost all they had in the war and moved to the capital, though in the series, her character ends up in the north of the country at the shores of the Caspian Sea. And it is here in the north, in the forest of one of the provinces by the sea, which is actually not a sea, but the largest lake in the world, so large to make it be called a sea rather than a lake, in Gilan province, that wild primroses grow in the middle of the winter to signal the arrival of spring. And it is from this province that my maternal ancestors come from. My mother's great-grandfather, that is her grandmother's father, Hakim Saburi, was the Mudir al-Ataba of the city of Rash, the capital of Gilan province, a title that means he was the chief doctor of the city of Rash, a city known for its progressive social movements, including ones for women's rights, thus historically boasting to its strong women and open-minded culture, though it has also, not surprising for the Iranian patriarchal culture, often been represented, especially through jokes, as a city whose men are unmanly, not man enough to defend their women's and their families and their culture's chastity and dignity. Of this ancestor, there was a portrait, an old-style photograph of a man in profile in black and white, the background color of the photograph turning the yellow of the passage of time, hanging in my grandfather's medical office, as he too was a doctor, one of the best in the country's capital, Tehran, whose office was simply in our house, or rather his house, because our family of four, my father, mother, and we, the 2 kids, were the ones who lived in his house, not the other way around. And his office didn't even have an official sign, but brought patients in from all over the country, patients who would travel and sit around for hours to be seen by the doctor, whose hands they believed brought recovery, the phrase being a literal translation of a Persian idiom describing a skilled doctor who can heal patients in ways others can't. And I remember that while I was growing up, the word on the street or around our house was that my grandfather could, without even the need for x-rays and tests, diagnose and cure ailments that other doctors had failed to. And so I guess it's safe to say that my grandfather was indeed a worthy successor to this ancestor, Hakim Saburi. The word Hakim translates to doctor or physician, though there is yet another layer of meaning to it, as it is a title mainly used for doctors in the old days, or if used today, solely for alternative medicine practitioners who practice the ancient Persian medicine belonging to the world of Ibn Sina, or as you call him, Avicenna, a name that has come to life through a mistranslation process that the page on him on Wikipedia calls a Latin corruption or a Latinization of his name. The word Hakim holds one other layer of meaning beyond the temporal one mentioned, a layer that comes from its being in Arabic in the conjugation form fa'il, which is used to make adjectives that are constant qualities for a person. For example, in this case, Hakim, created from the root letters HKM or Hekeme of the Arabic verb hok, means that the person is one who always has wisdom. Thus, making the doctor more than a doctor makes him a man of wisdom, sharing that adjective with God, as Hakim is also one of the names of the monolith God in Islam, meaning the all-wise, which, according to an internet page about the name, is repeated 33 times in the Quran. So I'm gonna skip. Anyway, moving on. And that's a sentence in the essay. Perhaps this is as good a place as any for me to move on to the last bit about primroses I want to share with you, to end this essay on a note that is closer to your culture, my beloved audience members in the English language, lest I be accused of missing an important piece of information about the flowers that relates to your beloved writer Shakespeare. According to Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust's website, Shakespeare mentions primroses 7 times in his work. First time in Hamlet, where he coins the term primrose path, which stands for a path strewn with flowers and means a path of pleasure, indulgence, or the easy route to life, a path of sins that leads to hell. The flower, however, based on other sources, has in English folklore a long associated history with fairies and has thus been nicknamed fairy cups, leading people to believe that if they ate them, they would see fairies. So my beloved audience, I leave you now with all these stories and bits and pieces of information, and it's upon you, or rather your memory, to pick and choose what you want to remember the next time you find yourself in the presence of the beautiful primrose flower. Thank you.
Next up, we have Scott Nadelson. Scott grew up in northern New Jersey before escaping to Oregon, where he has lived for the past 27 years. He has published a novel, a memoir, and 6 collections of short stories, most recently While It Lasts, winner of the Donald L. Jordan Prize for Literary Excellence. His new novel, Trust Me, is forthcoming from Forest Avenue Press in September 2024. Winner of the Reform Judaism Fiction Prize, the Great Lakes Colleges Association New Writers Award, and an Oregon Book Award, Scott's work has appeared in a variety of magazines and literary journals, including Plowshare, Story, The Southern Review, New England Review, Harvard Review, Glimmer Train, and the Best American Short Stories. He teaches at Willamette University, where he is Hallie Brown Ford Chair in Writing, and in the Rayner Writing Workshop MFA program at Pacific Lutheran University. Please welcome Scott.
Thank you. First, thank you to Jay for inviting me to be part of this awesome event tonight. It's such an honor to get to read with Stephanie and Poupeh and Dal, and to be here with this program. So I get to represent the rest of Willamette University, and I think I'm the only part of Willamette University that knows this gem of a program exists. But I am so grateful to be able to be collaborating with the program. So I'm going to read a little short story called Collision. And chose this one because it takes place just like half a mile that direction. This story it's part of a longer story, so it's actually the third part of what I think of as a panel story, like a 3-panel story. The stories aren't necessarily connected with each other, although they have the same narrator. But what holds them together, the story is called Coming Clean. And I think of each of the stories as a kind of confession or a series of confessions. Collision. Late one night, when I was driving home from a party in Southeast Portland, a bicycle appeared out of nowhere and swerved in front of my car. I spotted it in my periphery just before it crossed my path and braked hard, or thought I did. But when I came to a stop, I was in the middle of the intersection and the bike was behind me and to the left, one wheel bent and spinning. Its owner was on his back a few feet away, a black helmet beside him. If I'd felt the thud of impact, I couldn't remember it afterward. But my chin ached where it must have hit the steering wheel, blood seeped from my lower lip, and in my ears rang the sound of breaking glass. From one of my headlights, I guessed, though as my vision cleared, I could see that both still sent out their beams, lighting up the steady drizzle in front of the car's grille and the wet pavement beyond. The sound I imagined in any case was far more calamitous than the shattering of something as small as bulb or casing. As I sat there watching drops pass through the light, too stunned to move, I kept picturing a rock puncturing a plate glass window, a fantastic rain of glittering shards. When I finally turned back to him, the cyclist had rolled onto his side. I was surprised to discover he was alive, but even more to think I'd expected him not to be, to know that in those moments, confusion, I really believed I might have killed someone. A huge sob of relief belched out of my throat. And then I was quiet again, listening to the swish of windshield wipers and the hum of a cassette that had reached the end of its last track on one side but hadn't yet flipped. The cyclist rolled onto his stomach, pushed up to hands and knees. What I'd taken for a helmet, I now saw was a backpack, partly full but not stuffed, with a white patch or flag sewn above the zipper of a smaller secondary pocket. Still on his knees, he slung the pack over one shoulder and slipped the other arm through the loose strap. Only then did I put the car into park. I waited until he was on his feet before opening my door and getting out. He was a young guy, maybe 22, patchy stubble and a messy hairstyle, either fashionable or indifferent or both. His jeans were ripped at one knee, and so was the elbow of his sweatshirt. But whether those things had just happened or predated the accident, I didn't know. I had plenty of ripped jeans in my closet, though the pair I was wearing now were relatively fresh, as was my shirt, an iron gray button down I left untucked. This was my party outfit, not too casual, not too dressy, or so I hoped, though all the people at the party I just left had been either dressier or more casual. The men in t-shirts or old plaids, the women in halter top dresses and wedge heels. The cyclist would have fit in well at the party, certainly better than I had. At 31, I'd been the oldest person there. He hadn't yet turned to face me. Instead, he stared off in the direction of Belmont Street, a block to the north. In profile, his features were blunt and undistinguished, small nose, thin lips, flat chin. Only his eyebrows stood out, darker than his hair and odd-looking at the base of his high forehead. Those and a dark streak that might have been blood or maybe just dirt between his cheek and ear extending forward from his sideburn. Concussion, I thought. He needed to get to a hospital. But what I said was, "You're not hurt too bad." I meant it as a question, but it came out sounding like a plea or maybe a command. "You should wear a helmet," I went on. And though I knew there was no point in scolding him after I'd already hit him with my car, added, "You don't have any lights. How was I supposed to see you?" He didn't respond, just rubbed his eyes with his fingers and adjusted the backpack straps so they were tighter on his shoulders. Then he reached down for the bike, lifted it by one handle, rolled it back and forth. The rear wheel wobbled and one of the spokes caught on the chain. "I'll pitch in to have it fixed," I called, and fished my wallet out of the pocket. This time he did answer, or at least his mouth moved. But I couldn't hear what he said because behind me, my car was still running and the cassette had flipped over. John Lee Hooker. The guitar licks and growling vocals swallowed his words. All I found in my wallet, in any case, were $3 bills, a pair of crumpled receipts, a pink Post-it note with a phone number written in pencil, no name. Behind my credit card was a spare check, but I had no idea how much it cost to fix a bike. If you give me your number, I'll get the money to you by the end of the month, I called, after I get paid. Then I touched my lip and added, I might need some dental work. My face hit the wheel pretty hard. The bike was an old cruiser-style Schwinn, an original from the 60s by the look of it, with a red frame and red hand grips. The seat updated to a black gel saddle with fresh chrome springs. It looked heavy as the cyclist rolled it away from me, bent tires scraping the fender. Across Yamhill Street, he passed a 2-story brick building with a storefront I'd never noticed before, though I passed it dozens of times. Digital Solutions, that sign read, computer repair and services. The computers in the window were all at least 5 years old, bulky monitors and dusty towers with slots for floppy disks, many with missing side panels or gaps through which you could see to the circuit boards underneath. None of which inspired much confidence in the repair skills of the proprietors. Who'd take a machine there? I asked the cyclist as much, and this time, when he answered, I did hear him, despite John rack or ropes to tie it down the trunk. Plus, I didn't want to drive more than half a dozen blocks to my apartment. I'd been drinking at the party, not excessively, but not prudently either. 4, maybe 5 glasses of wine over the course of as many hours. I played the drive over in my mind, purposely taking side streets to avoid other cars, keeping carefully under the speed limit, coming to a full stop at intersections, only occasionally letting my thoughts drift back to the party, to the woman who'd invited me there, who'd kissed me in a hallway and then disappeared. I didn't know her well. We'd been introduced by a mutual friend who knew I'd been depressed for months following an ugly breakup, had gone out for coffee and then a drink. She was sleepy-eyed but vivacious, the gap between her front teeth and a slightly crooked nose, and 20 minutes after I parted from her, I could still hear the gravelly sound of her voice in my ear. I'd spent much of the party trying not to crowd her. We talked for a few minutes when I arrived, and several more times as we passed through the kitchen, refilling our glasses, each encounter with a sharper edge of flirtation. But mostly, I gave her space to talk to her friends, pretending I could enjoy myself at a party where I knew no one but her, where I was at least 5 years older than everyone in the room. I hung out on the back deck, leaning against the railing and trying to peer into the windows of a house across the high fence, or stood at the back of a crowd in the basement, watching a parade of scruffy bands set up their gear, play 3 or 4 ear-blistering songs, and then pack up indifferently, with cool, detached expressions, as if they were high on stage above cheering fans. My feigned independence paid off. When the young woman found me in the upstairs hallway, waiting to use the bathroom, she placed a hand on my chest and said, I've hardly seen you all night. I was afraid you left, but you didn't. You're right here. And then she pulled my face down to hers. Her mouth tasted like vodka and strawberry gum. But now you need to pee, she said. I won't stop you. When I came out of the bathroom, she was no longer in the hallway, and the party was clearing out. I searched for her in every room that wasn't locked, but found only a few people smoking or talking or passing out, or passed out on a pile of coats. The host, who played bass in one of the bands, asked if I was the guy from the record label. He'd heard I was coming. Had I called the set? What did I think? I'll be in touch, I said. I spent the car ride imagining what might have happened if the young woman had let me drive her home, or even better, if she'd agreed to come home with me. I envisioned the moment we get to my door, key snapping the deadbolt, my hand on her back, easing her forward. Would I turn on the light or lead her through the dark space I knew so well? Would we sit together on a couch, have another drink, or head straight to my bed? I tried not to picture anything more. Just let me have that kiss again, I thought, and everything else could wait. While driving, I hadn't even felt tipsy, but now the reflection of streetlights on puddles blurred my vision, and blood pumped hard in my ears. Make sure you get a light, I called as a cyclist reached Belmont Street. He walked unsteadily, but I could see no visible limp. We'd both gotten so lucky, I thought, and wanted him to acknowledge it too. But he just bolted across the street, the mangled back wheel of the Schwinn bouncing and skidding across the pavement. I half expected another car to charge out of the darkness and knock him down once more, and I held my breath until he made it safely to the other side. Then he turned east and kept running, and soon disappeared behind a building on the corner. I was shaking when I got back into my car. The clock on the dashboard read nearly 2 a.m., but since I hadn't changed it when daylight savings began a week earlier, it was actually closer to 3. The cassette was still playing the first song on its B-side, the boogie guitar driving hard. I couldn't have stood in the rain for more than a minute and a half, but it had soaked through the shoulders of my shirt, and I felt it dripping down my back. Even though I was in the middle of the intersection, I didn't want to move, not yet. So I sat there until the song finished. Then I drove the last stretch even more slowly, stopping for a full 5 seconds at each intersection before rolling through without touching the gas. I parked 2 blocks shy of my place in the attic of an old Victorian duplex and walked the rest of the way. When I got inside, I called the number in my wallet, which belonged to the young woman who kissed me at the party. If she answered, I would have told her about the accident. And if I did, maybe I wouldn't still be thinking about it now. But instead, I got her voicemail and left a rambling message. Just wanted to make sure she got home okay. Wanted to thank her for inviting me to the party. I'd had a great time, saw some not terrible bands. But of course, the highlight was getting to see her, and especially the moment we shared outside the bathroom. I was reminding her in case it was all fuzzy tomorrow, and maybe we can get together for a drink again soon, or dinner. I was a pretty decent cook. I'd make something for her, and she wanted to come by my place some evening in the near future. She didn't call me back, not that night, not the next day. After a week or two, I stopped expecting to hear from her, stopped imagining a second kiss or a visit to my bed. It didn't occur to me to wonder where she went after I stepped into the bathroom, or to worry that something had happened to her on the way home. Instead, I assumed my message had shattered any illusion of nonchalance I'd hoped to project at the party, that it had scared her off. Her silence knocked me back into the hole out of which I'd been trying half-heartedly to climb. And I stayed there, depressed and single, for another 2 years before meeting the woman I'd later married. Then I moved on to what would become the next phase of my life. Though now I think it feels that way only in retrospect. While I was living it, it just seemed a part of the same phase, one day giving over to the next, with a variety of changing circumstances, new house, new job, new baby. And 9 or so years passed before I saw the young woman again. It was on an airplane to New York. My wife and daughter and I were making our annual pilgrimage to look at artwork and visit friends. And while I stood in the back of the plane, waiting to use the bathroom, someone said my name. There she was, in the flight attendant's workspace, rocking an infant. She was still lively and attractive, but whatever had drawn me to her those years ago felt distant and shallow, no longer worthy of my attention. And I could read similar thoughts in her expression. Now that she understood what it meant to love a child, I wish she had wasted a moment with something as fleeting and insubstantial as a kiss with me. We spoke pleasantly enough, caught each other up on our work, exchanged thoughts about parenthood. She didn't refer to the party or the phone call. She never returned, only said, I always hoped I'd run into you again when my life wasn't such a mess. But that never happened. The second part, I mean. She laughed and touched the baby on the head, just below the spot where her knitted cap stopped short of her temple. Then she lowered her voice. I'm running away from her father. I used to love him, but now, I don't know, the smell of him makes me gag. Before I could respond, the bathroom door opened, and it was my turn to go inside. I worried that she'd be gone when I came out. Anything could happen while the door was closed, I thought. And then found myself recalling the moment before I knew the cyclist was still alive. before I put the car into park. If he hadn't gotten up, would I have driven away? I couldn't have said for sure. 9 years later, I still had moments of imagining it, easing my foot off the brake, rolling the rest of the way through the intersection, and then the 6 blocks to my apartment. The possibility seemed as alive now, the plane jiggling 30,000 feet above the Rocky Mountains, as it had in the moment I lingered in the car, foot on the brake. Spared the choice at the time, I was stuck with both scenarios, sometimes staying, sometimes fleeing, one version never more or less plausible than the other. This time, when I came out of the bathroom, the young woman was still there, rocking the child. "Come up and meet my family," I said, and told her our row number. She and my wife exchanged hellos, my daughter waggled fingers for the baby. And the woman and I said it was great to see each other, and that we should stay in touch. Though I knew we wouldn't, and suspected she did too. What might have happened if she'd returned my call all those years ago was like a taut wire between us, alive and buzzing with electricity, no matter how far apart we stretched. I wasn't sorry for the way my life had played out since then, not for a second. So why did I still need to hang on to those other lives, the ones I'd lived only in my imagination? She made her way to her seat, bouncing her baby, and we flew on to New York with different memories of a night 9 years earlier, with paths that would follow us or fade, but which, in either case, we could never change. Thanks a lot.
Last but not least, we have Dow Strom. Dow is an artist who works with 3 voices, written, sung, visual, to explore hybridity and the intersection of personal and collective histories. She is the author of the poetry collection Instrument, winner of the 2022 Oregon Book Award for Poetry, and its musical companion, Traveler's Ode, a bilingual poetry art book. You Will Always Be Someone from Somewhere Else, a memoir, We Were Meant to Be a Gentle People, and Song Cycle, East West, and 2 books of fiction, The Gentle Order of Girls and Boys, and Grass Roof, Tin Roof. She is co-editor with Jyoti Natarajan of the forthcoming anthology called A Mouth Holds Many Things, a decanon hybrid literary anthology published by Phonograph Editions. She is a recipient of a 2016 Creative Capital Award and 2020 Oregon Literary Arts Career Fellowship, and has received support also from RACC, Oregon Arts Commission, NEA, and others. A graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, Strom was born in Vietnam and lives in Portland, Oregon. She is co-founder of 2 collaborative art projects, She Who Has No Masters and Decanon.
I need to put a short bio on my website. The whole thing. Yeah, thank you for being here. Can everyone hear me all right? Thank you to the other readers. It's wonderful to hear you all. I was gonna start by reading a poem that doesn't belong to anything else. And then I actually haven't decided if I should read something new or if I should read an instrument. I don't have any thoughts. I have a long poem that I've been working on. It's not new, but it's not finished.
That would be nice to hear.
No.
I'll read that and then I'll finish with this poem because it's shorter. So this piece is, I'm calling it Mother Wound, and then I have these other pieces that are sort of under this, playing with post-war, and the title Post-War Table Fruit, but I have some pieces just dwelling on this concept of post, and to foreground, like my mother is a thorny person, and she's a really strong woman who's just done a lot in her life.
and been through a lot. And so this poem is actually sort of not just about her, but about like that condition of survival and sort of what comes with it. I'll just read these fragments. Post-war, the decapitated head to climb up inside her after the body of war is only natural, is only normal. Pulling oneself up into a decapitated head being one way to escape an overly mired life of the body. Especially in times when what is being done to the bodies is being done again and again, is impossible to be undone, is and has been too long beyond our power to exit. Mother, the books you wore to escape the war you wore. French literature, existentialism. I understand now the quandary between solidaire and solitaire was never just semantic. It lived in me. Hard to describe, benefaction of, elevation into, philosophy. Tragic comedic comprehension, a survival mechanism. I was born in the wake of. And then I'll read some sections from this forming long poem. On occasion from within the labyrinth, a stab, a keel, a punctuation mark of the loneliest kind of untrained singing escapes. It's true, nothing ever dies. Although she claims herself one of those with intellectual luxury enough to read the whole book about the communist spy. To name intellect as luxury means she denotes not everyone has it. Luxury and or intellect. Also, that she objects, though also accepts, even expects of others, a chiefly emotional knowledge of the subject matter. Equation beneath objection of a collective emotional body equals 4+ decades times a world education via severance. Living by feeling fades to a retrograde knowledge. Next to an exponential capacity to conjure networks of openings and corridors, behind which one may then minotaur the heart. Asian woman survivor tactic. Buddhic presenting smile beneath plastic visor, American tourist style. What survives inside a survivor? In private, though, I'm sure that she slips bacon between the bars. For there is an animal child inside every one of us, and but is triumph not the caging of our animals inside, which implies rather a fear of being incapable of changing anything. But once you learn to harness them with your hands, they walk beside you. They might follow. You learn the warmth of a mane brushing against your hip. Sometimes they carry you. This is a different kind of luxury entirely, I think, and it has no intellect. Myths of round things that receive things. Baskets and plates, bowls and wounds, other desirable cavities. The cult of mother reverence is, I believe, quite strategically linked to that of patriarchal dominance. I'm talking about a culture of pieties and deferences. I'm talking about the separation alleged between civility and the violence deemed necessary to civilize. Myths about the tirelessnesses of selflessnesses. Or that one about the wife who waits dutifully for returns for so long she turns into a rock. My mother was not a rock, nor did she climb nobly with hair blowing in the wind. And I too know rock and radiant. Because sometimes you get this idea through the shape of our eyes or the softness of our skins that nothing roars inside. I am talking about fire and ice in the veins, and about legacy, and about the eradicating force of history, I'm talking about a millennium's worth of violent self-undoing. And that long snake of waiting for one's time that feels like it may never come. Women as flag bearers and how the light dapples and graces them. In a cultural construct where men's wills and whims dominate, how strategic is it to give the other party that one that might construct things differently, pleasing yet seemingly important roles? And what could feel more pleasing than being placed in the position of beauty? What more important than upholding virtue and timber of allegiance for a whole circumscribed nation? It's the same sun, you know, for both north and south, on this side of the seas or that. Nationalism is a useless thing, a vile, destructive thing, said the famous Scandinavian American actor on a BBC interview on the TV in the hotel room in Cambodia. And I turned toward the TV then, surrendering just a little, wishing a beautifully neutral white man really could save you. Truth is, I learned something once in the snow. I had left the majority of my belongings in my mother's house by the sea to come north with 4 shirts, 1 coat, no furniture, accompanied only by my son, our cat, and the man I just married. I learned that what the trees have to teach, and hence nature's lesson, can only be received, not given, not granted, and never thrust upon one. And this is the kind of teaching the world had lost. I could not heal my relationship with my actual mother, and so I had resorted to standing in quiet glens in the Alaska woods and letting snow fall into my hair instead. I was trying to heal the larger relationship, or so I told myself. We were surrounded by the families of men on that road above the Gastineau Channel, the neighbors on either side, both sides, Vietnam veterans. You see how even in the far north, I could not escape the repercussions of my birth war, my war birth. My mother came to visit in the summer and we argued about Vietnam. Same arguments we've been having for years, sitting this time in hard plastic yellow seats in an Alaska ferry terminal. Glacier meltwater reflecting cut glass blue onto wide windows. Let's just say it's complicated to critique war in the abstract to a war refugee. What is the part of the story of South Vietnam, I asked her, that you feel has not yet been told? There is fire in her eyes as she replies, we were fighting for our freedom. Moments like these, I do not point out to her that it's the same rhetoric on all sides. I cannot speak honestly with my mother about how I see language, nor about the vagaries surrounding a word like freedom. And so often I don't speak. We walked in a small town 4th of July parade. Near the end of her visit, my mother broke out in shingles on her arms. On that visit, I did not introduce her to our neighbors. These speeders are thick by the water in summertime in Alaska. Let us read this one more section. 100 eggs, remember, seeded by what called the drive my father north to seek her in the first, and not yet mother's sorrow. Her tears, the formulation of rivers. The sea, the fable goes, did not yet know this tear-driven flavor of water. Origin tale of nation so blooms from fallen bird, mother's initiate wound. Which leads us to a hydro-relational dynamics, waterborne desire. But to be noted, she is not initially lamenting for or in want of love, but rather a separation from sisters. Birdfall into mountain denizen, sister world into isolate waithood. Yet another tale of a once world closing its gates due the woman's placing into her mouth something earthly, something ungodly, in this case, a pink dust. Why dust? Why always the mouth? Why pink? And why such cost ad nauseum for her curiosity? Women, historically, it seems, do not get to be whimsical. But sometimes I wonder, might not the myth be but also code, paradigmatic, farewell, epochal shift? If endings contain beginnings, might not an inverse be also true? And I'll stop on that section, and I'll just read this. I'll read this poem that I wrote for a public art project, which is actually downtown on the side of the Vanport building. And I was asked to write it in 2020. And a lot was going on in 2020. And the poem was supposed to address the time that we were in. And so the approach that I chose was to write about the element of air and breathing. It's called We Breathe, and breathing is an asynchronous music. Everybody needs the air. And there's actually a bilingual side to this poem. It was translated into Vietnamese by Vicky Now, and those words are also part of the installation. But I'm just going to read the English part. We breathe, and breathing is an asynchronous music, yet everybody needs the air. We are rhythm tender and tender rhythm. Asked to know, hear our roots, we dove into the revolving polyphonic tender timber ether. My response is to sing to the inevitable terror, shake the terrible, terrific air, harness the ineluctable. I fill the rift with river. I feel the rift with river. We breathe, and breathing is an asynchronous music. Yet everybody needs the air. Yet the air needs a music breathing, and we synchronous breathe, and everybody is. Is every music a body breathing needs? Is everybody asynchronous? And yet every air in music needs asynchronous breathing body. We, the air, music, body, needs, breathing is, yet the, and the air yet is every body, a breathing music, and we breathe and synchronous. Every music needs a body synchronous. Every air needs a breathing music. We, the air, music, body, needs, breathing is, yet the, and breathing is, breathing is, breathing is, and breathing is, breathing is, breathing is, and breathing is, breathing is, breathing is, and my response is to sing.
Give all of our readers one more round of applause. Stephanie, Poupeh, Scott, and Val. Thank you. What a beautiful reading. We started the day with Stephanie's amazing class, and we ended it with Val. in that song. Thank you. For those of you who are in the program and who might have a pairing form that's due, the pairing forms are due at midnight. We'll see you all tomorrow for BK Now's talk at 9 a.m. Thanks, IPRC. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. Just gotta like stop this.
I love your thing.